I'm taking a quick break from grading papers to record this video. I got a question and I'm going to read it here. I have a passion for League, but I also recently have a passion for Smash Brothers Melee. I was wondering if it's fine to approach both games with the same amount of self-improvement goals, or if I'd be spreading myself too thin with dealing with both in college. Some Smash Brothers players have done it, such as SSBM Hacks, who's a top 20 Melee and Hit Challenger. I was wondering if you had some tips. Okay, so the question is, can I pursue mastery in two different sports, two different games, while simultaneously doing college or some other thing? And yeah, let's talk about this topic. So let me back up and talk about early specialization versus late specialization and hitting mastery. So there are not a lot of people that hit mastery in something in two different things at the same exact time. Some people get very, very high level of two different sports or two different activities, but there are very few people that become like world champions, like top 5 in the world at one thing, and then also simultaneously at something else. But it sounds like more you're talking about just like being good at both of these and improving yourself through sport, through dedicated training. So let's talk a little bit about whether or not you should specify in a single thing or whether you should diversify your talent appreciation. And the research on this is very split. So historically, it has been the kind of go-to advice that early specialization is better, that you should specialize very early in your life in a sport, and you should train exclusively that sport all the way through until you become the best. That's the fastest and best way to improve. However, more recent findings have started to throw a wrench into this concept. And so what they've looked at and discovered is that there are people that can start training much later for something and train a much smaller number of years and yet hit the same level as somebody who specialized early. And essentially, what we're discovering is that there are a lot of different ways that the brain accumulates the skills necessary to become an elite level in anything, whether it is chess or hockey or baseball or Jeopardy, whatever it is, that there are a diverse number of talents that your brain needs, and that these are trained through life in various different ways. So for example, a kid who does not specialize in baseball but plays basketball and soccer and all these other things, and then later on decides to become a baseball star. Well, they have picked up lots of different things like how it is that they move their body, how it is that they train, game strategy, intelligence, dedication, all of these things that young people lack, and that they develop through other ways than through doing baseball. And then they come into baseball and they are able to either catch up or surpass people who were doing it all along. And we see this in language learning too. It takes children many more years to learn a language than a dedicated adult. Now, of course, adults can use bad methods and have bad motivation and then never learn a language. But if you dedicate yourself to it, you can learn it much faster than a child can, because you have more resources to draw upon. And so I am living in a country where this is very strongly promoted. Finland is kind of a central hub of research for things, for diversification and play. They do this in their schooling, where they do not have formal schooling for their kids really, like to the level that we do in the States, up until age 7. That's when they start first grade, and yet they outperform us on almost every metric in school. They do this in their sport, so they try to encourage people to diversify and specialize much later, and then they have a large number of Olympians in comparison to their population. So I'm of the opinion that diversification is always better for somebody who's not yet making a living at the sport that they're doing. So if you are pursuing excellence in something, if you're pursuing development of yourself, or development of your ability to strategize, or development of yourself as an esport athlete, possibly in a future esport. What you should do is dedicate yourself to improvement very strongly in something, and then switch that gear off and do something else. So I think that pursuing two different esports is perfectly fine if you're okay with possibly not becoming professional in them right away, because you aren't building up the kind of like network that you need in that particular sport. And also, I do have to warn against, you know, having too much to do in college. I mean, I had that problem. I ended up quitting swimming, and I got a lot more free time, so I spent it all in Counter-Strike. And once I added Diablo to Counter-Strike, it was like epic fail. So, as in, my grades. So I don't encourage doing this combined with college. I encourage picking one thing and then doing other things outside of esports. So choosing one esport to focus on as far as developing, and then treating the other things as play and not pressuring yourself over it. So let's say you're going to play Counter-Strike, and on the side you're going to do Super Smash Brothers. You should be very serious about Counter-Strike and structuring your life in Counter-Strike, like pursuing your passion there and pursuing mastery. But in Smash Brothers, you should simply try your hardest and see what happens. And you should play, and of course you should aim for like excellence, but you shouldn't strap yourself, and you shouldn't punish yourself if you don't reach that. You should treat it as like an outlet or a recovery mode or something that's fun, and watch what happens. And then I also encourage, of course, diversification in a different sport. So I would say like do Counter-Strike and then do Ultimate Frisbee, or do Counter-Strike and then do study of philosophy or chess or some sort of mental sport, or just do something physical, something mental and strategic, and then something esport related. I really can't encourage like the amount of screen time that you would have to put in to pursue mastery in two different sports. I think that as a physical activity like promoter, I think that that's like horribly a horrible waste of college time when you could be playing Ultimate Frisbee a lot, or doing the climbing wall, or I don't know what university you go to, but anywhere you are in life, there's all sorts of different like outdoor hobbies that you can mix in, and I think a healthy mix of that is really important. So, and I think that a healthy mix of outdoor and sport related and esport related things will actually make you better at esport. That is what we've seen in really well constructed research, that we can't understand the mechanism yet, but the results are very hard to argue with. So yeah, this was my video for the day, and representing Russia, striped shirts. I first encountered my like legit Russian when I was on the train from Beijing to St. Petersburg. It was about 8 days on the train there, and there was this Russian guy from oh great, now all my Russian friends are going to come after me. I totally forget. It's the city that's like south, big city. Anyway, yeah, he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Russian, and we ended up talking and communicating for about 3 days, just in like, we kind of like had this mental sync eventually. Like he explained how to play this game, and kind of we learned it and then played it a bunch, and then one time he was like, oh, you have to try this fat. It was this food, this Russian food, and he brought it, and it was just like this big chunk of fat, just fat. And I looked it up later, and I realized it's just the fat on the back of a pig, like they just cut it off and salt it and then eat it, just fat. And he was like, you got to try this, you have a knife. And I pulled out my little steak knife that I brought with me, and he just laughed at me and left, and came back with this like massive, like forearm long freaking knife thing, and then cut me off a bunch of slices. And yeah, and he was like, of course, wearing a striped shirt, and he was ripped and 6.5 foot tall, and had biceps larger than my skull. So that was a really fun train ride, and that was when I got interested in striped Russian shirts, because I think they make you look bigger. But then I put this on, and now I look smaller, so I'm not so sure. Anyway, this Mind Games TV episode 21, I forgot to mention that, was sponsored by Mind Games, my blog, and you can support us and keep the lights on for $5 a month at mindgames.gg/patron. Go there to see what you get with that patronizing membership. And I will see you guys next time. Oh, you can't see my hair. Dang, the whole time it was pointed down. It's super fluffy today. Anyway, yeah, back to grading papers. Ciao.